My wife and her coworker didn't even try to hide it when I caught them. They joked about my breakdown, completely unaware that I had already set a trap for their future. I stood right there in the doorway, staring at them, but they didn't even bother to pull apart. The soft glowing light of the kitchen illuminated the empty wine glasses and the undeniable intimacy hanging between my wife, Sarah, and her senior coworker, Marcus. When my voice cracked asking what was going on, Marcus just let out a quiet laugh, casually taking another sip of his drink like I was nothing more than an uninvited guest in my own home. Sarah didn't look guilty either. She just smirked, rolling her eyes as if my visible heartbreak was the funniest entertainment she had seen all week. That mockery stung worse than the actual betrayal, ringing in my ears as I retreated to the bedroom while their muted chuckles drifted down the hallway. They thought I was having a complete mental breakdown, reduced to a trembling wreck who couldn't handle the harsh reality of their arrogance. Sarah even whispered loud enough for me to hear that I was too weak to ever do anything about it, completely convinced I would just pack a bag and quietly cry myself to sleep. They were so blinded by their own cruelty that they mistook my deliberate silence for surrender, totally unaware that the tears on my face were already drying into pure rage. They had no idea that my apparent weakness was actually the best disguise I could have ever asked for. For 3 months before that humiliating night, I had suspected their little secret, quietly observing the subtle changes in her schedule, the sudden late nights at the office, and the whispered phone calls in the driveway. While they were busy planning their cozy future together behind my back, I was meticulously building a trap that would slowly ruin them both from the inside out. I didn't yell, I didn't slam doors, and I certainly didn't file for a simple, quick divorce because a simple heartbreak deserved a far more elaborate punishment. The next morning, I played the part of the shattered, pathetic husband to absolute perfection, barely making eye contact as Sarah gathered her things for work. She handed me a set of separation papers with a cold, triumphant smile, convinced she was walking away with half of everything I owned, including my family's legacy. I signed the preliminary documents without a single word of protest, letting her believe her aggressive lawyer had completely terrified me into total submission. Marcus even sent me a patronizing text message thanking me for making the transition so easy for everyone, completely unaware that every single step they took was following my script. What neither of them knew was that Marcus's high-paying corporate position relied heavily on a confidential software framework I had personally designed as a freelance consultant 2 years ago. When Sarah foolishly brought him into our lives, she gave me full access to his personal device networks through our shared home Wi-Fi during his frequent, arrogant visits. Over those months, I quietly embedded a subtle financial tracking sequence into his private accounts while simultaneously altering key corporate compliance files under his digital signature. To the rest of the professional world, Marcus was about to look like a massive embezzler who had been stealing millions from his own company's top investors. As for Sarah, her prized reputation as a top-tier financial advisor was entirely tied to the prestigious clients I had personally introduced to her firm over the years. She thought she was seamlessly taking those high-net-worth accounts with her to build a lucrative new life with Marcus after throwing me aside. Little did she realize, I had already spoken to every single one of those elite clients weeks ago, quietly revealing her unethical personal conduct and securing their agreement to pull their assets the moment she made her move. Her brilliant career wasn't just going to hit a minor bump. It was about to completely vaporize overnight. 2 weeks after I moved out of the house, Marcus and Sarah held a lavish victory dinner at an expensive downtown restaurant to celebrate their brand new, public life together. They toasted to their brilliant future, laughing about how easily they had swept me out of the picture without paying a real price. But just as Marcus raised his glass for a romantic toast, 3 sharp-dressed federal agents walked straight up to their candlelit table, holding a heavy stack of federal warrants. The entire crowded dining room went dead silent as cold metal handcuffs clicked tightly around Marcus's wrists right in front of everyone. Sarah screamed in absolute terror, demanding to know what kind of ridiculous mistake was happening to her brilliant, powerful new partner. The lead agent didn't even hesitate. He coldly read off a long list of severe wire fraud and corporate embezzlement charges that carried minimum 20-year prison sentences. As Marcus was dragged out of the crowded restaurant in complete disgrace, Sarah frantically reached for her phone to call her firm for urgent legal help. But when she unlocked her screen, her face drained of all color as dozens of urgent notifications flooded in, announcing that every single one of her major clients had simultaneously terminated their contracts. She sat alone at that messy dining table, trembling violently as the total destruction of her carefully constructed life crashed down around her in a matter of seconds. Her prestigious firm had already suspended her license pending a full internal investigation into her sudden, suspicious asset transfers. Within 48 hours, the comfortable world she and Marcus had built on my back had completely collapsed into a nightmare of endless police interrogations and imminent bankruptcy. She tried calling my phone dozens of times, leaving frantic, sobbing voicemails begging for my help, but I simply listened to them with a calm, quiet satisfaction. Late that Friday afternoon, I finally walked into the cold visitation room at the county jail where Marcus was being held in protective custody. Sitting behind the thick, smudged glass window, he looked completely broken, his expensive tailored suit replaced by a rough, oversized orange jumpsuit. He slammed his shaking hands against the divider, screaming through the small iron speaker that I had ruined his life over a stupid, meaningless affair. I just leaned in close to the glass, looking him straight in the eyes with a slow, relaxed smile that instantly cut off his furious shouting mid-sentence. "You made one fatal mistake, Marcus," I whispered softly into the receiver, making sure he heard every single word with crystal clarity. "You assumed that because I didn't fight back that night in the kitchen, I was too weak to protect what was mine." The blood completely drained from his pale face as he finally realized that the entire digital paper trail framing him wasn't an official police mistake at all. I hung up the phone while he desperately pounded on the heavy glass, leaving him to spend the next 2 decades trapped in a tiny cell reflecting on his grand victory. An hour later, I met Sarah in a quiet coffee shop near the courthouse so she could sign the final, revised settlement papers. She looked entirely unrecognizable, haggard, terrified, and desperate, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, begging to know how I could be so cruel to someone I used to love more than life itself. I simply tapped the unsigned signature line on the document, reminding her of the exact words she had whispered in our kitchen when she thought I was completely broken. She signed the paper with a trembling hand, surrendering the house, her savings, and her future just to avoid being named as a primary co-conspirator in Marcus's trial. As I gathered the signed documents into my leather briefcase, I finally leaned across the small wooden table and smiled at her one last time. "You were right about one thing that night, Sarah," I said quietly as I stood up to walk away into my brand new life. "I really was planning for our future. I just made sure that yours would be spent entirely in the dark."